Yeah.
So just kind of in terms of newbies, what would you call a sort of a Kubernetes newbie? A Kubies maybe, or a Kuber newbie or something like that?
That's a good one. Yeah.
So Nigel, kind of just want to go into the book in a little bit more detail now. Obviously, we're not going to be able to cover all the sort of chapters and contents of it. But would you say it's kind of easy to pick up by newbies as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the core tenets that I wanted for the book. But just before I say that, just when you're saying, we can't go into detail, I was literally about to say, yeah, we're not going to start reading from page 1. That would be terribly boring. But you know what? It reminded me there actually is an audio version of the book that I recorded as well.
Right. Cool.
I did slightly adapt the audio version because, referencing long YAML files and stuff.
Yeah.
Not so interesting to listen to on your headphones.
I'm sure.
But I have had pretty positive feedback about the audio book. But no, look, to get to your question, it was really fundamental for me that the book wouldn't sort of skip any of the foundational elements, that it wouldn't make assumptions that you already knew stuff. Because if you already know something and you reread it, written by somebody else, me in this case, it serves to remind you and to solidify and help you retain something. And it's not the end of the world if you reread something that you already know. Whereas on the flip side, if I just dive into a concept and assume that you know something, the potential for me having really sad readers, people that get upset and disappointed, is just massively bigger. So the book, like from a content perspective, starts out by in fact, look, we talked about it here, but it talks about what's the point of Kubernetes and why do we have it and what are containers, this new operating system of the cloud and things like that. It covers all of that. And I think if I remember right, we try and bust some jargon early on, like, what do we mean when we're going to be using terms like microservices and cloud native? Because I hate it when I start throwing buzzwords in and people might be like, I'm not really following because you haven't explained to me what microservices architecture is. So we really do start out with those fundamentals before we then start getting into the meat of the topic. And if you already know that stuff, crack on and skip the chapter. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, and I certainly relate to that. I mean, I've tried to, or when I've read books and I've kind of tried to get into the subject, and you've either been given extremely little in terms of sort of the background to set you up, or nothing at all, and you kind of just dive straight into big terms and what have you, and before you know it, you're kind of over your head with whatever
you're lost.
the content. Yeah, and you're completely lost, and that does would certainly puts me off. So just kind of in terms of newbies, what would you call a sort of a Kubernetes newbie? A Kubies maybe, or a Kuber newbie or something like that?
That's a good one. Yeah, that'll do. Yeah,
can we sort of officially coin something on this
but I think we'll struggle to officially coin it because we can barely officially
submit it to the CMCF. How about that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So just kind of talk me through the basics of kind of where the book starts and sort of where you finish with that.
So if you don't mind, I will actually. So if I go from the start, let me just show you the front cover. I don't know how well you can see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you look at it on Amazon or whatever. So the front cover, this is new this year, and it's designed to sort of appeal to geeks. So it's got a bunch of YAML on. It's got the Kubernetes logo in there.
Yep.
But then down this side, we've got a load of like container and Kubernetes related icons in matrix style, matrix code.
Yeah.
And hidden in there in Klingon text is a hidden phrase. I think if I remember right, it's in Klingon font. It just says the Kubernetes book. But we put that in there to have like a competition on Twitter for the first person to decode the hidden message gets a free book or whatever. Now, but the reason I mentioned the front cover is right from that very front, we're wanting to engage the geek in people if we can. You know, we want people to look at it and say, this looks like it's going to be a cool book. And then I'll say, just on probably the second page, if you can see this, I put my own signature on there. So that's like me putting my name to the book.
Right.
Now, yeah.
Literally.
Now look, getting to the content, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just look at the contents page. It starts with a bit of a primer on Kubernetes, like I just mentioned there. What's the point of it? What are containers all about?
Yeah.
Then I've got a chapter called Kubernetes Principles of Operation. Now, this was something that I was desperate to put in there, like how is Kubernetes constructed as a platform? What are the main elements of the control plane? How do things talk to each other? What are all of these reconciliation loops? And what's the concept of desired state and declarative, you know, manifests and things? Because previously in my tech career, in fact, when I was specializing as a Hitachi storage specialist, it was so hard to find information about how their storage systems worked. And I once got a hold of the engineers' PDF that had, I think it was a 200-page PDF called Principles of Operation. And I poured through and I learned so much about how the caching worked and how the back end all worked. What situations it would perform well in, where it wouldn't perform well. It was like a treasure trove for me, this theory of operation or principles of operation manual.
Right.
And I always wanted to put that at the front of the Kubernetes book, front and center. Like, let us get our head around the moving parts of Kubernetes as a cluster or as a platform to run applications on before we then go and learn how to deploy the applications. And I think it harks back to my career in enterprise tech and in financial services doing IT, always wanting me and the people that worked for me or with me to massively understand the platform that we were working with, so that when things went wrong in production, we knew how to fix something. And I always struggled if we had to deploy something to a platform that at least one of my team wasn't an expert on, because then when it goes wrong, it's like, and your boss and your boss's boss and their boss, you know, she's like bearing down on you, what's going on? You're like, and you can't answer the question. I just never want to be in that situation. So I wanted anybody that picked up my book, to have that opportunity to fully understand the core workings of Kubernetes as a platform. Sure. So we go from like the primer of what is it to like, what are all of the parts and how do they fit together? And then we go into installing Kubernetes. Now, this is an interesting one. Right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, interesting bit.
Well, so the first few editions of the book, I think I spent about 40 odd pages explaining different ways to install Kubernetes, because back then it really was hard to get and install Kubernetes. Whereas today, building it yourself is easier than it was before. But the ability to get it on your laptop through something like Minikube or Docker Desktop, especially with Docker Desktop, could hardly be easier. Google Docker Desktop, download, next, you've got Kubernetes on your laptop. Outrageously simple. You can also go to the cloud and take a hosted Kubernetes service, and you just go, give me a hosted Kubernetes service. I'll have whatever 5 nodes in the control plane across these regions on this version of Kubernetes, build, and your cloud provider will build you a high performance, highly available Kubernetes control plane. It's so easy to the point that now I think, so installing Kubernetes starts on page 29 and it finishes on page 37. Like, that's 8 pages. I'm crap at maths. That's 8 pages. It's come down from 40 odd pages to 8 pages. And that's like, yes, it's easier to get Kubernetes now, but it's also, you know, I don't have to waste 40 odd pages that if you're buying the print back version, you're paying for and I'm paying for. I can't make it any cheaper. And if you're not deploying to this one, there's 20 pages that you're not interested in, I can get to the meat quicker. So that's the advantage of self-publishing. You know, you're not stuck with let's find out how to install it 4 years ago. That doesn't apply now.
Agreed, and it's testament to the code as well, and that it's kind of, you know, moved along, and people have adopted it, and certainly made it easier. And I know that you had a few analogies in there as well, which I thought were actually quite good. It's always good to kind of try and throw in something that makes a concept easier or more relatable. So you kind of use things like the package courier analogy
Yeah.
in there. I can't remember what was that one for.
I think that was for as long as you package your container or package
Yes,
your
that's
application
it.
as a container with all of its dependencies and stuff, and then you apply a Kubernetes manifest or a YAML to that. That's kind of like boxing something up for DHL, putting a shipping label on, and letting them take care of getting it to the customer at the other side of the world.
Yeah.
You do that with your application as a container with a Kubernetes manifest.
Yeah.
You give it to Kubernetes. Kubernetes decides which cluster nodes to run it on that have got enough performance, that is spread across, different availability zones, things like that. Will take care of self-healing any problems. You package it up, give it to Kubernetes, go have a cup of coffee or whatever you want. Kubernetes will do all the logistics that like a DHL or a UPS or somebody would do. Yeah.
Yes, and then the other one was the brain and the muscles, I think, which was quite good. I think that was your master and your
masters
sort of
versus worker nodes. Yeah. Can I give you my favorite analogy? And I'll just check what I used in this book, because here we go. All right, so this one in the Kubernetes book, I don't know if we can see that.
Yes,
I've got
I was going to get to that.
With footballers, yeah.
Yes.
So sometimes I go soccer or American football as an example, or even an orchestra with different instruments.
Yes.
And if we stick to football or soccer, I say that like a soccer team, I will call it a soccer team just because we have an international audience.
You never know who's watching.
Against me. A soccer team is made up of lots of different players that have different roles in the team. Goalkeeper, a striker, a defender, whatever, and you switch people on and off depending on how well the game is going. Well, a modern microservices application is just the same. So that application has front-end web servers, back-end stores, authentication systems, logging, and they're all different systems, but they get brought together to work as a meaningful application. And what brings it together is Kubernetes. Kubernetes brings them all together, gives them their job to do in the application, manages scaling them up depending on demand, manages replacing failed instances. The same as a coach in a football or a soccer team, brings the team together, gives everybody their positions to play in, and adjusts the players depending on what the score is in the game. If somebody gets injured, the coach is responsible for swapping them out. So we make this analogy that like Kubernetes is like the coach for your microservices application, which if we look at it, kind of looks like a soccer team in a way. Yeah. And for me, like analogies like that, we say a picture speaks 1,000 words, but sometimes an analogy can be really powerful in sort of distilling quite a complex technical concept sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with that, and I actually had that in my notes. I was going to sort of go through that, but you've.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, it's fine. You've covered that, and that's perfect, and that does really make a great deal of sense. And there's a lot of kind of stuff that's related there. And one of the quotes or a couple of the quotes I really liked was you said, I think somewhere in the book, as long as you're running Kubernetes, it doesn't matter if the underlying systems are on premises, in your own data center, they're in an edge cluster, or in the public cloud. And that's kind of the unifying power, I guess, of Kubernetes. And then I think in the when you were trying to define what an orchestrator is, I think you put it very simply and very accurately and said it's a system that takes care of deploying and managing your apps, which was brilliant. I think that was kind of really, lots of people kind of tend to struggle or they kind of give you a long-winded explanation or something. And but I think that was quite good. So you said,
I think couple that with the soccer analogy.
Yeah.
Because different people learn different ways as well. Some people learn with pictures and analogies, and it's just trying to cover as many bases as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm certainly a visual person as well. I'm practical, kind of, give it to me and I'll kind of have a go at it, and I'll learn it that way. And then practical and sort of visual as well, kind of certainly appeals to me as well. So yeah, so you certainly kind of cover the basics, and I think all those analogies are very useful. And you go into sort of all the components of Kubernetes, API server, the scheduler, kubelet, all that kind of stuff. And then you get into a little bit more sort of more detailed or more sort of advanced sections, shall we say, in the later chapters. So everything from sort of things like, you know, service discovery, storage, stateful sets, and kind of finish off, as you said earlier, with security as well. Real world Kubernetes security, I think, is one of your chapters. So that's kind of really quite extensive. And as we said earlier, it's an opportunity for somebody to start and maybe stop, go off and do some experimentation, some playing around with some of those easy to install, distributions of Kubernetes. You said, just get it running on the laptop as I've done. But also then sort of start getting into the more advanced stuff, and maybe even go off and do this is sort of in practice in a sort of a test or dev environment at work, and kind of demonstrate it as a technology to your organization.
Yeah. So the book has loads of examples in it as well, and it has a GitHub repo where you can pull the example code down onto Docker Desktop on your laptop or host it in the cloud, wherever, and actually go through the examples, which was a really important element of the book for me, because as much as I'm sort of a visual learner, probably like yourself, I'm one of those people that, and people get this wrong about me all the time, because I've written books and stuff. They assume that I'm super clever or that I know everything, and neither of those are true. I find it really hard to learn new technologies. And the most powerful thing for me is actually seeing it happen and doing it myself. So it was really important for me that there were easy to follow examples in the book, that if you want to, you can actually follow along with those examples. And it was dead important for me, because I come from more of an infrastructure background, that the code that's made available in GitHub, that I actually in the book include the commands on how you actually clone a GitHub repo, because I'm not an expert with GitHub.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I was initially getting involved with containers and stuff, I had to really learn GitHub, and everybody just assumed, oh, you must be a developer, you must understand how GitHub works, clone this repo locally. I still remember the day where cloning a repo locally was another language to me.
Yeah.
So even though the examples are in GitHub, don't be afraid of picking the book up thinking, gosh, I'm going to have to work out how to get this code from GitHub, because I even explain that. I don't want anybody to pick the book up and be like, well, he thought I knew what GitHub was, because no. So
absolutely. And I've certainly related to that. I've been on many sort of either online or in person ones, sort of courses or sort of half days and stuff like that. And then they kind of take you to the instructions and say, okay, off you go. They give you a couple of slides and then they go, okay, off you go. And then you start and it says, okay, so we've done all the installs, we've done all the configs, and you just got to press these buttons. I go, oh, hang on, I actually wanted to see the installation. I actually wanted to do the install so I can learn how you put it together. But you kind of skip all the interesting stuff, to be honest. So
Now, can I just caveat by saying, when I take the time to explain all of this stuff, I'm not trying to pretend that I'm perfect either, because there will no doubt be somebody that picks up the book and I may have overlooked something and not explained it well enough. But if that's the case, I've got my contact details at the front of the book. Reach out to me and I will thank you, and I will make that change to the next edition of the book. And that's how it works. It's an iterative process like that, because I can push a new update to the book anytime I want, to be honest. So I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect at this, but it is constantly in my mind and I'm always trying.
Thank you for watching this talk. If you enjoyed the content, please comment, share, like, and subscribe. See you next time.